Showtime?
Miss Lucy. Mr. McFloyd. Starting, Mr. Chair.
I would like to call the Committee of the Whole Budget meeting of March 1st, 2023 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Reimer, Councillor and Chair of the Budget Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given, and if assistance is required, please see the clerk seated in the front here. Once you've evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure your cell phones are on silent or turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Roll call for this evening. All members of council are in attendance, with Councillor Brunet attending remotely. Good to see you, Councillor Brunet. We have senior staff in attendance. Number 3, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Murray, I understand you have a declared interest. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I declare an interest in item 7.2 on the basis that I'm employed by an organization with a benefiting interest in the matter.
Thank you very much. Number 4, statutory public meetings. We have no statutory public meetings this evening. Delegations. Number 5, we do not have any delegations this evening. Number 6, our consent agenda is empty. We have no consent agenda items. Number 7, regular agenda. We're now considering item 7.1, 2023 budget deliberations, phase 3, operating budget introduction. This builds on our previous discussions regarding capital projects and capital works for the town of Lincoln. We recognize staff input and endeavors to get us to this point in the budget process, and we look forward to continued discussions tonight. With this in mind, it's my hope that council approves the operating budget as presented. This budget includes the impacts of our decisions to remove and delay capital project works, and as such, the overall forecasted impact has been reduced by 2.3 from earlier forecasts, which is a significant change. I want to congratulate all members of council for the thoughtful discussions and deliberations in getting us to this point in the process. Our CEO, Mike Kirkopoulos, will provide some introductory comments. Mike, please go ahead.
Through you, Chair Reimer, and thank you to you and members of council for the opportunity to speak this evening. As members of council know, staff put a lot of work behind the scenes before we bring anything forward for deliberations. As you know, we often meet with our stakeholders and members of the public to discuss the merits of any project or activity. You're going to hear a little bit this evening from Mr. Deaney about some of our results in terms of that engagement, but I'll highlight a personal experience. Just last week, 2 residents that many of us know who are probably watching this evening, Jane and David, spent almost 2 hours with me discussing the town's budget. And I had the opportunity to walk them through all components of the budget and ask to them and receive from them questions that I think were very well thought out, very well researched. We shared perspectives. They had some good questions, and I think leaving that meeting, we're both more well informed in terms of how we move forward. I can assure council and our residents that staff go through a very rigorous process to ensure we are looking at the budget from both an affordability perspective, but also in investing in the high quality services and programs our residents have come to expect. I want to say to those watching and to members of council, the time and effort to get where we are today has not been easy. We talk needs and wants, and each department has its needs. And despite filtering out levels of needs and wants, and even examining all of those over and over again, we've all realized we still can't afford to do everything when you consider and include affordability in the equation. As a corporate leadership team, we have discussed everything on the table: level of fire service, camping programs, frequency of grass cutting, and every one of our other 92 services that we offer, many of which are legislated. We have discussed what is the minimum service level and what is health and safety. We've already internally made trade-offs and had those conversations, and I would suggest often heated. We have reflected on the last 2 years, where our tax increases were 1.9 and 2.1% respectively. This means a total tax increase of under 1%. And of course, that was a challenge internally, but more of a challenge for our residents as we face the global health crisis. And I think we could all agree it was the right thing to do. We recognize that residents and their own budgets are being challenged. Affordability of things like groceries or gas continues to be of concern for some, and inflationary pressures across the board are a concern for our residents. Those same factors are affecting municipal budgets, with many uncontrollables hitting us as well, and you'll hear some of that as we go through the presentation. Last week, we cut capital projects, as Chair Reimer highlighted, and delayed others, cutting millions from our capital program. We also discussed with rigor and debate, should we do certain roads and delay others? None of this, and ultimately where we end up tonight, is or will be easy. We have more work to do, and we realize we do not have unlimited funds. But that is why what we have before you this evening is a budget that tries to balance all of that. I look forward to the discussion tonight and in the coming months as we review priorities and remap the 10-year capital plan. You will also hear tonight a number of questions about compensation, staffing, as well as other human resource challenges and costs, things like insurance, WSIB, benefits, and other things that are controlled provincially and by our service providers. We look forward to both the in-camera discussion later on and those questions council may have. I also look forward to discussing with council the organizational opportunities ahead. But rest assured, members of council, our operating budget, our staffing levels, and our overall budget is sound. We successfully already do more with less. We've trimmed where we could, and we are a high-functioning municipality. And so with that, I turn it over to Lawrence and look forward to the conversation.
Go ahead, Director of Finance, Administration, Innovation, Lawrence Wagner.
Thank you, Chair Reimer. Good evening, members of council. I'm happy to be here this evening. I want to thank staff and council members for all the input and the efforts and work to date on the budget. So tonight concludes the discussion on the town's capital plan from our kickoff meeting in January. I will present a quick summary or wrap-up, and then I will proceed to present the proposed operating budget for council consideration and deliberation. Next slide, please. So the agenda tonight will simply be the 2023 capital budget recap. Paul will present our interim engagement results or survey results as it relates to our budget. I'll quickly cover or talk about the budget process and some of the actions we did over the last year or actions to date, provide a budget overview, and finally our 2023 proposed operating budget. Next slide, please. So if council recalls, during our last budget meeting, council removed, amended, and deferred several capital projects. We started off the discussion with over $50 million in proposed capital investments, and through council debate and discussion, we reduced the 2023 capital by $2.1 or $2.2 million, and we now have approximately $48 million in approved capital works. Next slide, please. In summary, we removed 3 projects totaling $225,000. These included security locks, single-use plastic receptacles, and environmental programs. We amended and deferred 7 capital project works, which included delaying the purchase of a backhoe and winter maintenance vehicles. We delayed some works on the Gateway Wayfinding project. We reduced the amount requested for roads and pushed out things like the Glenbrook Sewer project, among others. The changes had a direct impact on our earlier proposed budget, which was sitting all in at 9.8% prior to these changes. Next slide, please. So tonight is again phase 5 of the budget process. It's an inform, debate, and approve stage. Next slide, please. On the operating, so this is covering the actions to date. We engaged the community through our budget survey. And again, Paul will go a little bit more in detail on that. We met with individual council members, both as by ward or by individuals, not only during budget time, but throughout the year to incorporate your feedback and input. Taking in this information, department staff revised, adjusted, and modified all proposals as needed. Next slide, please. And I'll turn this next section over to Paul. We'll talk about the survey and what we did as a town to get information from our residents and our local community.
Thank you, Director Wagner, and good evening, members of council. So pleased to be here this evening to talk a little bit about our 2023 budget engagement results. A little bit of a typo on one of the initial slides. This is not the interim results. These are the final engagement results for our 2023 budget engagement. So communications and finance staff did utilize speakuplincoln.ca to inform, educate, and engage our residents on the budget process. Similar to previous years, we had a dedicated page on our Speak Up Lincoln page, our website, to help, as I said, educate and inform our residents. On that page included key dates, budget presentations, our infographics, proposed capital projects, as well as breakdowns from previous budgets, as well as our survey and other charts and key information in terms of how we formulate our budgets here at the municipality. Next slide, please. So our online survey was opened between August 2022 and closed in January 2023. Previous to last year, we did use a multifaceted approach to help promote the survey in our Speak Up Lincoln page. We utilized social media channels here at the town. We utilized print media, so ads in local papers. We did have a direct mailer to the entire community specifically on the budget. And we did use the mayor and council community newsletters as well throughout this process to help drive traffic to the website. In addition, we did use a Town of Lincoln email signature campaign, and we asked our partners down at the Downtown Bench BIA to include it in their digital newsletter. As well, we had included in our tourism and economic development digital newsletters that went out quite frequently. Next page. So in regards to the results, overall, we had over 1,700 unique visitors to the site. This was up from 1,300 from previous years. Of the 1,700, it can be broken down into aware participants, informed participants, and survey participants. So of the 17, the aware participants, they read through the Speak Up Lincoln page. Of that 1,700, 273 clicked on supporting documentation, viewed an infographic, visited the key dates page, or selected multiple items on that Speak Up Lincoln page. Of the 273, 180 decided to go a step further and participate in the online survey. Next slide. So in regards to the survey results, 60% of respondents identified as males, 37.2 as females. The age breakdowns, as you can see here, the 45 to 65-year-old age category seems to be our largest cohort that fills out the survey. In addition, our respondents and the location of the respondents, Beamsville being our population density here in our community, overwhelmingly, most of the respondents live in Beamsville. Vineland at 10%, Jordan at 13%. This is actually the first time that Jordan has gone ahead of Vineland in terms of respondents, and then Camden. So how long have you lived in the community? Respondents typically tend to be from the 5 years or less period or the 20-year plus. So those are the two main cohorts that respondents seem to be answering from. Next slide. So 87.3% of respondents rate overall level of satisfaction with our services from somewhat satisfied to very satisfied. 74% of respondents are positive to the question whether they receive value for their tax dollars. In regards to the question, where would you like to see investments made? Top 4 respondents, and these are average ranks. Number 1 being winter operations and community beautification, roads, fire services, parks, trails, and recreational programming. Next slide. In regards to strategies to address the infrastructure gap, this response is ranked in order of importance, and the following strategies were identified. So continuing the dedicated special infrastructure levy, dispose of town-owned property, use financial reserves, defer projects, increase the overall tax levy, and of course, debenture. Next slide. Thank you. Regarding what is your primary source of information about the town's budget, so 38% of respondents identified the Town of Lincoln website or the Speak Up Lincoln page, 19 using our local newspaper, Town of Lincoln social media, tax bill insert. Regarding what is your preferred source of information, this was a little bit more multiple choice, so 141 respondents identified the website and Speak Up Lincoln, social media, local newspaper, tax bill insert, and of course members of council as well at 25. Next slide. So the last question of the survey was our Q20 question, and this was asking residents to provide some additional comments that they would like to be considered in the preparation of the 2023 budget. These are the top responses, and not every resident or individual that filled out the survey answered this question. This was optional. But of the responses that we do see here, and I'm not going to go through everyone, but the ones that are quotation marks or direct quotes that were pulled out, the ones that are not under quotation are more amalgamations of multiple responses that we've seen on the survey. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back to Director Wagner, but looking forward to answering any questions at the end. Thank you.
So just to follow on the survey results, I want to say we do listen. We're thinking long-term, and this year we introduced a multi-year budget outlook. We think it's important to do, as the residents are asking us to think beyond the current or upcoming year. It's just one piece to help us plan and ensure we're on the path that consider community needs and ensures we're balancing the demands of not only today, but the future. This is more for a comment for Chief. Chief, I have to say the comment you put up about fire service amalgamation is brilliant. It's a great thing. Just kidding. All kidding aside, we will continue to explore shared services as we go forward and look for ways to enhance service delivery and control our costs for our residents. Now let's talk about the municipal budget. The budget is approved annually and serves to meet the needs of the community. It's quite simply a fiscal plan that supports the delivery of services and community wants and needs. It aligns or should align with council priorities, which we will be remapping again or re-evaluating shortly. And it considers the longer-term vision or plans of council and the community at large. Next slide, please. With every year, we typically try to approve the budget each December. The only exception is usually in election years when we tend to delay the process just a bit. The second bullet highlights a simple fact that I want to highlight and reinforce. Staff do not consider this as business as usual when we develop a budget. We do not, let me repeat, think of the local resident as an unending source of funds. We did start at a different number, quite higher, I might say, than what you see before you tonight. And I can assure you, as Mike indicated earlier, it was significantly what you saw today or will see today. So we looked at areas we could reduce. We looked at our historical spending, we debated, we sometimes argued, we prioritized items, and we found ways to lower the overall impact. At the same time, we took in feedback and comments from a variety of sources to get where we are today. Now, the levy is not the only source of revenue in the municipal budget, as you know. The town also collects revenues from our programs and user fees, and we also get government transfers, typically received as grants. Next slide, please. So there's really 6 drivers as it relates to this year's budget that I think are of key importance. Growth being the first. Growth puts pressure on departments to grow and maintain service levels, which typically cost more. It requires more infrastructure to meet growing demands. Inflation, it's no surprise to anyone at the table or anyone who goes to the local grocery store. As an example, gas prices increased by 25.8% of last year-over-year increases. You can look at the CPI, but each item is affected differently. And you must consider how you consume resources when you look at this. So inflation does impact people differently, and it does impact the town. COVID, and I know Councillor Brunet will always say, when are we going to be done with COVID and the comments about COVID? The last 2 years, we received funding from the province to offset costs related to COVID. So that was great, but some of those costs still remain. And revenue, I have to highlight, though we went through the user fee study to look at certain types of revenue, some of our programs still remain flat from 2020. So we haven't seen a lot of the recovery we expected to see from COVID on the revenue side. Provincial grants, the province keeps announcing that they provide municipalities with monies and sources of funds. But as we grow, examples are OOMF, our Ontario Municipal Program Fund, the acronym I'm probably butchering, continues to decline as we get bigger and bigger and our community becomes larger. Our OSIP funding declined as well. A few years ago, the province increased it and is slowly, gradually decreasing it, which creates a pressure on our budget. Our level of service, people want more. Heck, I want more, as we all do, and these can lead to increased cost. As an example, more people using our programs and facilities creates increased demands or needs for more CSRs at our facilities. Council priorities are your longer-term vision. We'll begin discussions in the future week, but these all shape the budget, shape where we're going, whether it's the capital or operating side of the budget. Next slide, please. So budget considerations, there's several. When it comes to the federal or provincial, debt is a problem. The feds announced with COVID, with the relief they provided, that their coffers are bare. So I suspect that at the federal level, they'll be looking or having challenges for finding programs in case we do go into a recession. The interest rates that the feds pay on long-term rates are actually flipping upside for them, so it's actually costing them money, the rates on bonds. Provincial debt still remains significantly higher. They're still fighting for their share from the federal level. So I still expect to see potential decrease or loss of provincial short and long-term funding. I still expect to see inflation and long-term interest rates remain for a substantive amount of time, though on the news the other day, they were talking about some of the effects of the interest rates starting to grip consumer confidence, starting to slow. So it's actually consumer spending is not keeping up with the pace of decline in business rates. So it looks like some of the expected impacts from the Bank of Canada are starting to take hold on the economy. So it's a good thing for interest rates as in potential rising. What it means in future rates, it could mean that they keep them at the same rate for a longer time or potentially decrease them. Economic, social, and emotional impacts of the broader macroeconomic conditions. You know, everybody feels it differently depending on your salary level, your wage levels and such. What happened globally, all of these things play equally on there. Global war, the war in the Ukraine, China, the economy, they just launched a whole bunch of new programs and new departments to try to stimulate their economy. It's a lot of things happening at the same time. These all have potential impacts on long-term growth and where we're going. These all have a potential to impact our cash flow, where we proceed to, debt levels, debt borrowing costs, and the like. Next slide. So the operating budget provides services that residents rely on every day, such as firefighting, snow clearing, maintenance of roads and parks, recreation services, and the library. The operating budget also contributes to the future rehabilitation and day-to-day maintenance of town assets. These include potholes on the roads that we drive over every day to ensure the services provided today can continue and are provided in the future. The operating budget simply pays for day-to-day operations of the organization. It's usually consumed in the same year. It covers things like salary and wages, programs and services, as Mike talked about, grass cutting, snow removal, public skating program, the utility costs we consume. We do have those as well. Next slide, please. So the operating budget includes base adjustments. These are typically non-discretionary items that are required to maintain existing services, such as wages, utility increases, and contract increases. Those are typically fixed. We have one-time non-recurring expenditures, such as consulting studies, maintenance projects, emergency repairs, and the like. Growth, it typically impacts our budget. Any costs or revenues that have been added above previous service level. This is usually assessment or changes in assessment. So as a community grows, as we get new people on our tax roll, those tend to be added as our growth projections, but also sometimes people enhance their properties, which adds surplus to the town revenues. Operating impacts from capital projects. Anticipated expenditures from approved capital projects, such as the operating costs associated with newly constructed facility and long-term borrowing installments. I'll get to that later. In our interfunctional transfers, we carry a lot of our debt costs, and those are picked up on the operating side of the budget. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be interesting, and I mentioned it earlier, talk about some of the things so that finance doesn't just sit back and wait for things. Some of the things that we did over the last year that council's aware of. We did, and we looked at revamping our non-union comp policy. In there, we introduced some additional controls. We established that any step increases will be aligned with the budget. Under the old policy or the previous policy, they were done with time of anniversary of staff. It's tougher to budget for, and I found there's some anomalies related to that. We instituted position management controls. We went through the whole organization structure, assigned for every permanent FTE a position control number so that we can track and monitor those, so we have a better line of sight on those. Previously, it was not done, and we found some anomalies on there. Line-by-line audit. I know several councillors have asked me about going line by line. I went back 5 years of spending, different department spending, overall spending based on materiality first, looked at the trends, looked at what the costs were for COVID. I removed COVID-related costs. Where there was zero spending in a line and it wasn't looking like it was there, I asked the departments to rationalize their spending. I also right-sized a lot of the budget. In some budget lines, there was spending occurring that I expected to be continuing, that was historical, that was never right-sized, so we adjusted and moved stuff around. Council knows that we came through council with the activity-based costing exercise done by Watson on our planning and building permits, because I'm always looking for opportunities to reduce the impact to the levy. Prior to that, we introduced the reserve policy. This year, we introduced the multi-year forecast, both on the capital and operating side of things. And I think it's important to see, because I think if you can look at a snapshot today and seem to forget about the future, and that's not, I think, where a council wants to go, nor do I think it's prudent. Next slide, please. So in this slide, this is a simple illustrated graphic. You've seen it in last year's budget book. The total proposed budget for the levy impact would be 22.16 million. Our two largest program areas that deliver the largest number of programs and services are Public Works Program, all your infrastructure, roads, water, our Community Services Program, which supports our facilities and the like. Next slide, please. So here, if you look here, our rate charges have increased. Those are typically tied to the user rate fees and the rate charges for water. Our property tax levy has to make up the gap. It's increasing approximately $2 million. Our penalties and interest, a slightly increase. Taxation other, those are the supplemental. So when a property value goes up, we expect it to increase just because simple growth, and we looked at the trends. Financial revenue remains relatively flat, and as do transfers. Transfers have decreased slightly because of some programs falling off. Next slide, please. So here in the compensation, this is probably where we're going to have a lot of our discussion, whether it's the interfunctional transfer or the compensation line. Our transfers have increased significantly, largely to cover off debt and largely to cover off the hospital costs, which was a previously agreed to fund by council in 2008. And our compensation line, which I'll get to in a bit. Services and supplies, you'll note it went down. When I talked to you about the line-by-line budget review, I went through everybody's line-by-line budget. I removed COVID-related costs because COVID somehow miraculously disappeared. So any of those costs associated, those expected increased costs removed. Well, we also lost the provincial funding. So I reduced, or we collectively reduced that spending in that line by approximately 6%. Administrative costs slightly gone up. Those are related to legal and insurance-related costs, vehicles, technology and equipment. Some of it's related to infrastructure, IT infrastructure, software programming for building and planning, and some of it's related to costs such as gas and the like for what we consume day to day. Next slide, please. This is always the fun one. So this is one of the biggest pieces of your budget, and I think it's important to break it down and provide some more context as it relates to this. So the base compensation based on last year was approximately 14.3 million. And yes, the increase is approximately proposed to be 1.8 million. So let me go through some of the drivers here and talk about what it is. The cost of living allowance, I'll start from the bottom, go up. That's tied to your collective bargaining agreement. It's tied to existing arrangements we have with our CUPE staff. And it's something we cannot necessarily avoid. It's something that we have to live with, and it's a reoccurring thing. I do expect it to go up next year when we negotiate the contract with CUPE in 2024. What that means will depend on what we have as an economic climate and how the job market is. Our benefits are again going up. Benefits are driven based on base cost increases, so the cost to provide the service from the service providers, but it's also tied large part to your salary, tied also your usage. So they do it based on claims incidents. And last year we had seen an increase in certain categories, which also drive up the costs. I do have a positive note on that. I have a meeting with our benefits provider to try to see if I can bring that cost down. I know Grimsby is facing a significant higher increase on benefits. I think I can still get a little bit off of there, and I will work towards that, and that's my commitment to council. The Joint Jobs and Evaluation Committee. So that's a management union thing, and the union has a right to have their jobs reassessed, and it's based on what the jobs they perform. So over time, organizations change, they shift job functions, people's jobs outputs and outcomes change, and so occasionally what happens is staff ask for the jobs to be reevaluated. At this time, there was 22 jobs that were sent in for reevaluation. Not all got affected by this, but it affected a significant amount. I can tell you in my department, a few of my finance staff, my procurement staff, had significant changes based on the scope of their duty, and the fact is their job spec didn't reflect what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. We have to pay for what people do. The non-union comp. So this is another one that's, we presented to council. I know Mike will go more into detail on this. We went to market, we assessed where we were in our comparison. To be quite frank, looking at some of the postings I've done in my department, whether it be for IT staff or finance, it's probably about time. I didn't get the biggest pool of candidates or what I was expecting based on the market rates we paid for some of our roles. We had to go, we're going out our second time for our IT software developer because the candidates are not there, and it's something we have to look at. If we're not the destination of choice, we have to figure out other ways to draw them in. Firefighters, based on the volume of calls, based on the number of service calls, looking at actual numbers from last year, the amount of hours needed to support what we expect to see this year is expected to increase by $240,000. Overtime, I went back and looked at the overtime line. The proposal that came in primarily from Public Works, from Fire, a little bit higher than what you see and presented towards you. I went back to look at what their actual spend was, look at the rationalization of hours. We reduced it, but that's again reflective of the time and effort needed to do the services in the community. That varies. It can go up, it can go down, but that's a realistic number. In the audit, we found some anomalies. That's why we put position control numbers in. We noted staff weren't necessarily captured in the right spot. We didn't have all the hours associated with some of our seasonal staff. Council, as example, I know one councillor asked about the compensation line increase. It included the fact is that OMERS wasn't ever built into the council budget. So we went line by line through that as well, along with the regular operating expenditures as well. You were getting the OMERS line, but it was never included in that side. And finally, with COVID, we had offsetting funds. We increased the number of CSRs at our facilities to support our community. Well, with the COVID money disappearing, there's an intent or desire to keep our community service reps, our customer service reps in those facilities to service our communities. I think it's something the community wants and needs and desires. In addition, you see aquatic staff. Again, talking about market rates, our community service program has indicated that last year was a bit of a challenge to draw on new lifeguards based on the hourly rates that they were posting. They're not necessarily equivalent to local communities, and that's where we draw from. So they're suggesting a smaller, modest increase to the hourly rate to make sure that we actually have lifeguards in our pool to provide community programs for our residents. Next slide. So again, I said there's two drivers. There's comp and the interfunctional transfers. And I'll ask Julie to maybe chime in on the library in a second. A large part of the drivers here are program increase. So your road rehabilitation, those potholes I talked about, the bridges and culverts, to do the bridges and culvert we're doing based on the costs, and the sidewalks. So we're increasing the number of sidewalks or the services for those. Previously approved debt repayments. It's over $600K. So those are for previously approved projects like Jordan Village, which we've started to draw on, which is coming along, I understand, very well and nicely. Those would be for previous pumper truck, dump truck, a tandem truck and such. Those are starting to come online as we close out projects. So that's part of our growth in the interfunctional transfer. West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. I presented to council earlier, middle of last year, on that it's actually expected to come to fruition in 2025. We have to increase our contribution because we know what our requirement is as a town. And our obligation, if we continue to fund, obviously built into a reserve. That reserve will help offset some of the debt, but we will still need to take out some debt in 2025 on it. Finally, as the election comes up, so the other category, as we have an election, we deplete a reserve, and then slowly we add back to the reserve over the next 4 years to prepare for the next reserve. And library is a modest increase. I believe it went up 30,000 year over year. But they do a lot of great things, and I don't know if Julie wants to come up and talk about anything. Yep. Come on up, you can say what library does.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Good evening, Chair Reimer, Mary Stin, members of council. This is going to be very brief, because I plan to come with quite a floor show for you in the coming weeks about, just to report on all of the great stuff we've been doing since our merger on April 1 of last year. But I brought some numbers tonight just so that you could have those to reflect on. So in 2022, we circulated about 300,000 items, welcomed 2,200 new members. 27,000 residents of all ages attended 880 programs that were held in all 4 branches, in all 4 communities, at various locations. We installed 2 permanent story walks in parks in Lincoln and Pelham, as well as a greenhouse in partnership with the United Way, and a pollinator garden together with NPCA. Our new 11-member library board met for the first time last week. We're looking forward to community surveys and consultation in the weeks ahead as we work towards a new strategic plan. So the agreement between the municipalities of Lincoln and Pelham directed the operational budget for this year. We've really worked hard to maximize efficiencies and come in, as Lawrence mentioned, at $30,000 increase. So we appreciate the continued support of council. We're excited to move forward with plans for growth and change. And I just want to plug our new program, Books on the Bench. We've got Perdita Felicienne coming on May 4th at a local winery, and it'll be a wonderful event, a fundraiser for the library. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie.
Next slide, please. So this is the breakdown of a proposed operating summary. As you'll see, the revenues changed some partly from the user rates and rate charges, water and wastewater. As I said earlier, our compensation is one of our largest drivers, represents approximately 50% of the overall town expenditures. Our services and supplies, as I said, I'm happy to say we reduced by 6%, and that was from going through a line-by-line review. Administrative, large drivers here are related to our insurance-related costs to keep coverage as a town. It continues to be a hard market, and it also includes legal costs. So we ended up looking at the costs that we incurred over the last couple of years, and it includes what we expect to spend this year. Obviously, that can change depending on the number of items coming forward or the number of challenges and such. So it's very important that we keep an eye on those. Vehicles, equipment, technology, that's a large part. I believe over 65K was expected increase in gas. So our vehicles consume gas. As I mentioned earlier, the inflation rate on year over year on gas prices, up 26%, 25.8 if you want to go exact. It's driving a large part of that increase. Utilities, I think, is self-explanatory. Utilities costs continue to go up. I don't know about you, but my home gas bill jumped immensely. We suffer the same fate as others. Financial expenditures going down. So financial expenditures are usually like write-offs or interest forgiveness and stuff like that. As we're out of COVID, and I'll go back to Councillor Brunet, we're getting out of COVID. We're now looking at ways to make sure that, that's no longer an excuse. So we're going to see if we can tighten that up a little bit as well. Transfers and interfunctional transfers, large part, as I mentioned earlier, the new programs, library election, and debt. Next slide, please. So I thought this was important to illustrate. If you look at 2021 and 2022, our respective levy increase after growth was relatively low. And it was sustained in a large part related to the reserves. Reserves are like a savings account, so it's not something you can do ongoing because eventually you run out of those savings. And I started to look backwards to our trends. From 2016 to 2022, our average levy increase was 5.6%. In simple terms, 2023 is somewhat of a catch-up year. It includes one-time costs related for SIPs. It includes our costs related to SIPs with the legal agreements. It includes a hospital, includes debt financing and the like. If I take out those prior year decisions, the hospital, the CIPs, and the debt that was previously approved, the overall operating increase is about 3%. That's adjusted. I think that's relatively low, and if you consider it related to inflation, it's significantly lower. You'll see our forecast going out continues to decline or becomes moderate. 2024 is 4.4%. I did build some escalating factors in there, like inflation or increases for benefits, inflation at a modest pace, not what we're seeing today, and included an adjustment to the QP agreement. I don't suspect we're going to negotiate to the same level as we did before. Following that, it's 1.8, 2.5. That's assuming no new programs and nothing changes on that front. So in general, I think we're going the right trend. We do have to do a bit of a catch-up this year. Next slide, please. So the after-growth levy increase includes West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. As a previous council decision and obligation, funding to come from reserves. So that's what we're contributing now, and increased funding to set aside to save in order to keep our debt down to a reasonable level. And it's going to be a 30-year debenture of approximately, based on what the interest rates are, based on our contributions, about $4.7 million required in 2025. Our debt repayment increase of approximately $660K for previous approved capital projects or purchases like Jordan Village, as I mentioned, fire equipment, dump truck, sewer pond, rehabilitation. Those have a variety of terms, and you typically tie your debt to the life of the asset. So those range in debentures from 15, or debt terms, 15 to 30 years. We have our community improvement plans. We had existing commitments. We have existing commitments that exceeded the annual contribution going in. And as such, since we have a legal obligation to pay those, we have to up the amount required. The only amount of money put into this year's operating budget is the amount that's forecast. If council recalls, in July last year, I believe, I forecasted $493K. The updated forecast is only $372, and that's all we asked for there. I don't think it's prudent to ask for more until council makes a decision on what they want to do with SIPs in the future. Based on what's legally bound or what's outstanding, it's approximately $4.7 million of levy funded side. We do have a small development charge reduction, or a development charge reduction we have to pay over a longer term time, or a longer period, of approximately $4.7 million. That I think is a longer term horizon item, but the more immediate is a 4.7 that's coming out from 2023 to 2032. Next slide, please. Budget highlights. So overall for the town, the proposed increase would be 7.5. If you look at the total blended rate, it would be 6.57. The region recently approved a 7.58% increase. Our total annual impact on a town of Lincolnville, based on a 378 residential assessment, it's approximately $132.82. And I know I've had several councilors ask, well, our current prices in the town are $500,000, $800,000. I can't argue that. But this is based on what MPAC has assessment. As you know, MPAC hasn't reassessed property taxes since 2016, and expected to be probably in 2024, the next reassessment comes out. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? In 2023, at a 6.44 blended rate, the approximate impact per household for the year at the assessed property value included, and I'll go for the 500,000 level, it's approximately $417.25 for the year, or $1.14 a day. Next slide, please. So what does this do? For an $8.02 increase in a week, as Mike mentioned earlier, we have 92 separate different programs. This provides community safety, fire and rescue services, winter operations, snow removal, salting, sanding of roads, recreation programs, recreation activities, maintaining our parks, our facilities, community beautification, grass cutting, trees, flowers on our boulevards, our economic development and tourism services, parks and facilities maintenance, community events, Fling on King being one, museum and cultural services, library services, and bylaw services. Next slide, please. So the town provides over 90 programs and services, and with that, council and staff continually look at to balance affordability with service levels, and it did take us a long time to get here. Next slide, please. So as council recalls, we did have to look at changing our fees and charges. For most of our fees and user fees, we kept it to the line to general inflation, not necessarily what was posted, but a 3 to 5%, depending on how much we had in control. We increased our water and water rates. As council recalls, we kept our rates at 0% over the last 4 years. We've had to catch up. We looked at balancing debt, our future capital works and such, which required a kind of like a reset. Depending on what the 10-year remapping turns out to be, I will have to take a look at the rate increases are proposed, because Watson proposed it based on our 10-year plan. And as you know, we're going to look at those and maybe move some things around, which may have a potential on the change to the rates. Next slide, please. So, in summary, the 2023 budget proposal. So 1.3% capital levy increase, that's the debt. 6.2 operating increase. With your changes to the capital works, you're delaying, you're deferring, removing projects. It decreased from a previously high number of all in at 9.8, decreased by 2.3%. Total ask, 7.5 to the town portion. And just to recall, the town is responsible for approximately 37% of the tax bill, not the biggest driver. The overall impact, therefore, is 2.77% on the total tax bill for the town of Lincoln. This allows a continued investment in our infrastructure while delivering the high-quality program and services our community expects and wants. Next slide, please. I think I'm going to turn it over to Mike so you can talk before we go into the thing for comp.
Just before you go there, thank you to quite an extensive overview, Lawrence, and a lot of information in that report. So thank you to you and to the CLT and staff, everyone that was involved in that presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, CO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you and I chatted before in terms of the level of information or how in-depth I wanted to be in providing some comments at this particular point in time. I would suggest, because we are at the end of Mr. Wagner's presentation, that I do want to share some information or some decision points with council. I'd prefer to do those in camera first, and then we can come out of camera and take questions. So I do leave it to your discretion, Chair, in terms of how and when we enter in camera, but I would say now is probably the opportune time.
Before we motion to move into closed session, I would like to explain what will happen for those watching on live stream. The clerk will be turning off the live webcast during the closed portion of the meeting. Once we have completed the closed portion of the meeting, we will resume with the live webcast and carry on with the public portion of the meeting, and we'll read the motions in public session. Before we begin the closed session, all members are reminded that any discussions in closed are to remain confidential, as per our procedural bylaw and our code of conduct. I will now ask the town clerk to conduct the closed session statement for Councillor Bernay, attending the closed session remotely. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I need those attending electronically to confirm the following: that you understand that matters are to remain confidential, confirm no one else is present with you, confirm no one else can hear this closed session, confirm that you're not using any electronic devices other than your tablet, computer, or telephone for the video conferencing, and confirm that you are not recording this portion of the meeting. If you acknowledge all of the above, please reply with "I understand" and confirm to all of the statements. Councillor Bernay?
I understand and conform to all of the statements.
Thank you very much.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva. Under Section 239 of the Municipal Act, notice is hereby given that council adjourn to closed session in order to address item 8.1 as follows. Pursuant to the Municipal Act, Section 239(2)(b), personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. I will now ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Council. I'll ask you to, as a show of hands, please. And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Our clerk will now proceed with the technical requirements to move into closed session. I have a motion moved by Councillor Renjima that council resume an open session. Madam Clerk, please open the vote.
The vote is now open. Mary Easton. And I'm closing that vote. And that carries unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I will ask you, coming out of closed, I will ask you to read the motions as well, please.
Wait. Can you scroll down, please? Okay, I will read it in full. That council receive and file the confidential update as it relates to Municipal Act, Section 239B, personal natures and matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and that council direct the CAO to declare a hiring freeze on any net new FTEs and look to seek operational efficiencies where possible and report back to council before the end of 2023.
You can open the vote for that, Madam Clerk.
We had it.
The vote is open. And I'm closing the vote. And that carries unanimously.
Thank you. And there is another motion, please, if you could read that as well.
Moved by Mayor Easton that council direct the CIO to continue to review opportunities for shared services within the Niagara region. The vote is now open. Councillor Brunet? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Brunet.
Oh, I've got it now. Thank you.
I submitted.
Yeah.
Okay, just came in. Thank you.
And I'll be closing the vote. And that carries unanimously, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving along, as previously raised this evening by Councillor Murray and the stated declaration of interest, we will motion to lift the DMO line item to be voted on separately. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell that council approves $75,000 towards the Destination Marketing Organization, DMO, including in the Services and Supplies, Economic Development and Communications 2023 budget. Madam Clerk, you please open the vote. I have one question from Councillor Renjima. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had a question earlier on, and I did approach the CFO about this, and that's, so the proposal is that for this year and also for next year, that we approve $75,000 in funding for the Destination Marketing Organization. And the proposal is that in the long run, when we start receiving MAT tax, which has some work to get that going, that the Destination Market Organization will be self-funded. So we're asking from the taxpayers $75,000 this year and potentially $75,000 next year. So I asked the CFO if there's a way that we can earmark funds to go back to the rate stabilization fund once that MAT tax starts coming in. So I'm going to ask you about that.
you understand the question, Director?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Chair Reimer.
Please go ahead.
To Councilor Regima, yeah, that, I believe that's possible. We would probably enter in some kind of funding agreement or not necessarily a service level agreement with the said organization. And the language could be as simple as such, that anything greater than when the MAT tax actually is being received, any contribution greater than the need for operations is returned back to the town to offset the initial costs to operationalize it. So we can look to provide something or add something to whatever agreement's in place with them when it's finally executed, for sure.
Thank you. Councilor Regima?
Yes, thank you. That would help me be comfortable with that investment over the next couple of years. Or
Thank you.
for this year, anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll now
Madam Clerk, please open the vote.
open the vote. And the vote is now open. And I will close the vote. And that carries 6-2.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva. That council approve $48,022,215 in capital infrastructure projects, which includes debt funding of up to $33,186,857. That the debt will be financed from the following funding sources: $5,569,357 from tax levy, $8,884,000 water, wastewater user rates, $18,733,500 from development charges. Following the projects: Project 2020-94 Lakeshore Road, $5,569,357. Project 2021-62 Lincoln Avenue, $8,745,000. 2021-56 Durham Road, $2,572,500 total debt. 2021-25 Pumper, $1,100,000. 2022-88 Ontario Street Sanitary Sewer Upsizing, $7 million. 2020-14 Prudhome's, $8,200,000. And that council approve $6,440,000 in debt funding for previously approved 2022 capital infrastructure projects. The debt to be financed from the following funding sources, totaling $6,440,000 in development charges. And these projects: 2023-7 Aberdeen and Hillside Slope Stabilization and Reconstruction, $2,840,000. 2019-32 Green Lane Phase 1 Upgrade Widening, $3,600,000. I will now ask our clerk, Councillor Mikulik, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Could we get a recorded vote?
Yes? Madam Clerk, you can call the vote whenever you're ready.
And the vote is open. Okay, 1 second. It's not showing on mine either. Cancel. Sorry, Chair, we're just having a technical difficulty here. Give me 1 moment. I put it on again? says voting in progress. Okay. Does everybody see the vote? Yeah. You do? Okay, can you vote?
We did it again.
Okay. I can't see anything, sorry.
We did that on purpose, Counselor.
I know, but it's not showing on here. So what I'm going to do, Chair, I'm going to have to do it the old-fashioned way and ask for everybody's vote individually.
Many of us are still
Okay.
old-fashioned, so go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Brunet, can I have your vote, please, in favor or opposed?
In favor?
Thank you. Can you mark down, please? Councillor Rajima, in favor or opposed? In favor. Thank you. Councillor Miklick? You're not on, but you're opposed? Thank you. Councillor Timmers?
In favor.
You're in favor. Thank you. And Councillor Murray?
In favor.
You're in favor. Thank you. Councillor Pachariva?
In favor.
You're in favor. Thank you. Councillor Russell?
Opposed.
Opposed. Thank you. And Mayor Easton, are you in favor or
In
opposed?
favor.
You are in favor. And Chair?
In favor.
In favor. Thank you. That carries. Can I just check for one thing, please? 2 opposed and 7 in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Final motion for the evening is moved by Councillor Russell. That we receive and file as information the presentation provided by staff regarding the 2023 budget deliberations, and whereas the Council of the Town of Lincoln has evaluated the capital and operational requirements for the Town of Lincoln to ensure the efficient delivery of municipal services to the ratepayers of the Town of Lincoln, now therefore be it resolved that the 2023 budget expenditures of $33,317,597 be approved. And further, that the 2023 budget be approved with a tax levy requirement of $22,157,485 for local municipal purposes. And further, that the Council of the Town of Lincoln direct staff to prepare the annual taxation levying bylaw as required by the Municipal Act 2001 upon the setting of the tax ratios and requisition amounts by the Regional Municipality of Niagara and other applicable bodies. Madam Clerk, you may open the vote. Councilor Miklick, we already opened the vote. One question?
Could I see that on the screen?
I'm trying.
Oh, thank you.
Please continue with the vote, Madam Clerk.
And the vote is now open. Councillor Brunet.
It's not showing up on my screen, Madam Chair.
Is he
so,
in favor or opposed?
Could you please then state, Councilor Brunet, in favor or opposed?
Yeah, in favor.
Thank you.
And that carries 8-1. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 8, confidential items. We have no further confidential items. Number 9, committee remarks. Do we have any committee remarks? Councilor Miklick, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I wasn't going to originally say anything, but I just want to thank staff, senior staff at all levels, everyone involved in the budget deliberations for all their hard work and effort with with regards to this. Yeah, my views are that, you know, I come from a different mentality when it comes to spending, and this budget was challenging for myself to, you know, considering my first budget was 11 million in capital, and I can't remember the operations, but this was a heavy budget for me to process and to digest at this time. Those are my comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miklick. Seeing nobody else with comments, I will ask CO to comment, and then Mayor Easton has a few words as well. Go ahead, Mr. CO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just I will keep my comments really brief this evening. I do want to thank council. I think similar to the comments made by Councillor Miklick. I know I speak for our entire corporate leadership team when I say that we appreciate the guidance, the leadership, as well as the trust that you put in us to make the community better for all. I'll end by just saying I think staff enjoy coming into work every day. Not I think, I know staff enjoy coming into work every day. We all take pride in what we do and strive to make the community and this community and the community we work in, some of us live in, we definitely shop, eat, and enjoy in one that we can all be proud of. So thank you, members of council.
Thank you, Mr. CO. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank the council for embracing, I think, a significant a sea change, if you will, in terms of how we approach this budget. There was certainly a lot at stake. And I think that there were a number of skills that were brought to the table that I think I would consider them to be a significant improvement over the way we have approached budgets in the past, which is exactly what we ought to be doing. Every year should get better and every process should be tighter. I believe that government should serve as an agent of reform. It is our role to build goodwill for the people. And the trends that are being built are really built on change in policy, and policy is the focus of council. And I believe that we're really starting to engage with this principle very strongly. Government regulation is meant to promote fairness and to protect the ordinary citizen. And there has been a lot of discussion about how we do that. And I believe that there's many ways that decisions that are made in the town of Lincoln actually embrace this issue. And we do that by ensuring that we don't become so attached to the financial elements that we ignore all the other dimensions. We don't just care about GDP, we care about general health and well-being. If we're not looking at that in depth, along with how much things are costing, we are definitely going to miss some people, and they are always going to be on the periphery. It is our role to mitigate individual hardship, or is it? Or is it our role to provide amenities and services that benefit health and well-being? And I want to say on this note that the region, in the deliberations that we had over a week ago, increased their levy. We increased the levy by putting back into the budget quite a number of programs that were available to us to delete, and they were all related to poverty. Every one of them related to the most disadvantaged in our community. So I want to thank my colleagues at the region for their part in ensuring that we didn't leave those people out again, because I've seen that list in the past and it always seems to slide through, and this time it did not. So I think that's a very good sign. The budget that we've passed here this evening has been the work of many, many months. There's a stability to this. There's a stability and an economic sustainability that drives this budget. There's also an element that is a kinder, gentler approach to the way we contribute to the decision-making in our community. And I believe that we have essentially removed, if it's not gone, it's almost gone, any chaos in terms of on-the-fly motions, not considering absolutely every element. And we're going to have so much practice in terms of evaluating business cases in the next few months that if it isn't washed out now, it's definitely going to be washed out in the future. Because our greatest success in this town has been sitting down, developing a plan, working that plan, and delivering it with all the discipline that we could muster. And I don't think you can do any better than that. I want to thank everyone on council for supporting the motion on shared services. We have 11 other municipalities, 12 if you count the region, that we can be dance partners with. You have to pick your dance partners, and that's what we're starting to do. We have a number of really excellent examples. And I have to say that when you have wonderful examples like the library services, where there isn't even a hiccup, not a hiccup, and yet our towns, the towns of Pelham and Lincoln are so far apart, and yet they've managed to come together on the issue. So they've set the stage and set the standard really for cooperation, for leadership, and I want to thank you very much for that. So overall, my final comment is really around the job that the staff have done. They have answered the same questions over and over again. They have ensured that we understand how everything links together and how every dot is connected. I don't think that there is anything that wasn't examined. I want to thank Lawrence in particular. It could have been anybody, but it was his job to do the investigating, to make sure that he understood completely so that we could understand exactly what was happening in that line-by-line review. Not a 1 year, not a 2 year, but a 5-year review. It was all his job to examine the audit and find out just exactly what was happening and what needed to change. And he did that, and thank you very much for that, Mr. Wagner. I know it was your job, but I know that the CAO and everyone else had to get into that. Why? Because the staff that we've hired are not just a excellent individual. These people know how to work together. They know how to put a project together by putting all of their input into it. And that is a very, very desirable position to be in. So I know that we will never, and we don't need to worry about ever agreeing on absolutely every matter. But I do know that people in this community expect us to conduct ourselves in a very professional manner. They expect the ultimate when it comes to transparency, and I think that we are doing very, very well in that area. And where we're not, we will change that and make sure that we do better in the future. We have excellent communications, and we've heard that over and over. So thank you very, very much to the staff. You have been a tremendous, tremendous asset to council's ability to understand and to make some pretty hard decisions. And we're looking forward to your leadership in the community. I'm very proud to be the mayor and the head of council at this time. I think we've done a great job. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Councilor Patriva.
Thank you, Chair Reimer, and I'd just like to thank you for your excellent job of chairing the budget, keeping us all in line, all on track, limiting our questions, and not being afraid to call us on it, and also your VC. Good job.
Speechless, Councilor Patriva. I will, thank you. Thank you to, in closing, thank you to staff for long hours and hard work. That does not go unnoticed, as the mayor so eloquently put it. She puts it better than I do sometimes, but it's very much appreciated. Thank you to council for our spirited debate and scrutinizing eyes, I'll say. that's also welcomed in the intention that it was brought to the table here. And a personal thank you to Director Wagner and CEO Kirkopoulos and Vice Chair Russell for the support. So thank you very much. Good night. And being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 8:46.